Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Unfound Live for what is today, September 15th of 2025. I hope everybody is doing very well out there. It was a fantastically beautiful day here in Clearwater Beach, Florida, where I have lived for over 6 years, and of course in the Gulf Coast area since 2011. It was absolutely beautiful. I know it's beautiful when I can go out in the middle of the day and do a little disc throwing in the shade, and it is just like the absolute perfect temperature. I loved it. So I got some good disc throwing in today. As you are watching tonight, listening tonight, whatever you're doing, please give this show a thumbs up. You can do that right there below the screen or on YouTube or wherever on Facebook. You can subscribe to this channel if you've never heard of Unfound before, down there in the right-hand corner. If you're watching on Facebook, you can go and find the discussion group. Request to be a member there. You can go like and share Unfound's page on Facebook. Also have an Instagram account. Also have a TikTok account, but I haven't been using that. Got the website, the newfangled designed website, the Unfound Podcast.com, and hopefully if I have time before I'm done tonight, I will tell you about the other website that is just about done. You can support what we do here at Unfound. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, support Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. You can hit the super chat button below the chat on YouTube down there, over there on the right side of the screen. And then also you can join the YouTube channel. I know somebody last week even paid out some new members, gifting people memberships, which is fantastic. But you can hit the join button below. But some of you, depending on where you are watching, might not be able to see that button on your app. It depends. So there's plenty of ways to support Unfound, what we do here, and we would appreciate it. Thank you. Hopefully, we deserve your support. I have a fantastic, as usual, show lined up for you tonight. Fantastic list of topics, and as you know, the criteria is whatever I have in the title for this live show will get discussed. Can't make a guarantee about anything else. But whatever is in the title will be discussed over the next 2 hours. Of course, I picked this one out, the Robin Graham disappearance from LA, going way back to the year I was born, of 1970. But you might think, well, that's very, very random of you picking that one out. I'm guessing not a lot of people know about it, but I think of it often when there are any disappearances that we have featured, maybe like Mara Murray, where people tend to think, well, woman broke down on the side of the road and she got picked up by somebody. And for some reason, I've known about Robin Graham's disappearance for a very long time. I don't know why. But we're going to take a look at that one because it's somewhat accepted that she did get picked up by a stranger. So I'm going to take a look at that and going to give you my insights into it. And of course, if you've never heard of it, good look it up for yourself. It has its own Wikipedia page. It has its own Charlie Project page. Many things have been written about it. I don't know how many YouTube shows or podcasts have covered it, but there's a lot of material out there about her disappearance going way, way, way back 55 years. But like I said, I've known about it, and I often think about it for cases with women or men, I guess, breaking down on the side of the road. What are the odds of them getting picked up by a stranger and something bad happened? So there's that. Also going to talk about the murder of Charlie Kirk. Yes, what happened in Utah last week. And yes, of course, I'm staying away from the politics of it. I'm going to take a look at it from just a murder point of view. And I'm going to express some ideas that I have expressed before in other types of crimes that I've discussed on this live show. Once again, I'm not here to get into the politics and all that stuff. You know, I would never, ever, ever, never, never, ever, ever, never, ever, never, ever do that. We're going to just take a look at it from, once again, this is what we do here. I do crime. It's certainly a crime. I realize there were people that celebrated. Once again, I'm not here to I'm not taking sides on whether his belief system is right. The people who opposed him was right. All I know is people shouldn't be shot for what they say. But we're going, well, no matter what it is. So we're just going to look at this from, or I am going to look at this from just a crime murder point of view, looking at whether this really, from a crime point of view, needed to happen. Was it unavoidable? What could have been done to avoid it? And I think that, like I said, you're going to hear some things that you've heard on this show before. And then also, I need to talk about, yes, 50 Cent, it seems, yes, the rapper, Find Me in the Club, going back 25 years or however long that was. He's getting in. He's going to be hosting a true crime show. And of course, I have to talk about that. So as I said, as I always try to do these days, whatever is in the title is getting covered. Anything outside of that, I may or may not get to it, but I do have plenty of topics to cover. Just don't know how long those three particular topics will last. But I will start as to, what has gone on with me since the last time we all got together. Well, I went to see Dream Theater last Wednesday, so I missed trivia. My trivia team actually won Wednesday night without me. That just shows you how much of an asset I am to that team. I'm very happy for them, excited for them. Came down to a tiebreaker, which they won. Very excited. This is the final week of the season coming up. We're ahead by 74 points. So we're still not guaranteed first place. Things could still go wrong on Wednesday night and us coming. We could not come in third. The worst we'll do is second, but we still have to play pretty well on Wednesday night, even though we're ahead by 74 points because, it's not unusual for a team to get 180 points. So we could get passed up if we really mess up. But that's what went on at trivia last week. I wasn't there. They won, and very excited for all of them. It's pretty cool. But I went to see Dream Theater, and my buddy Dana and I, we had a good time, got together beforehand, had a nice meal before we walked down to the sound, which, as I've said before, is right over here. I can see it from my building. It's across the bay, the small bay from where I live. And there's no doubt that they are great musicians. There's no doubt that the lead singer can sing. There's no doubt that they know how to put on a show. They did 3 hours of music with maybe, a 15-minute break in the middle. And if you don't know who Dream Theater is, they're kind of what I would call symphonic progressive rock. They have a singer, they have a bass player, they only have one guitar player. They have a keyboard player, which he plays a considerable part in their music, and that's fairly unusual in what you would call heavy metal music. Although Deep Purple certainly has had a great keyboardist in John Lord. I know it's not heavy metal, but like Bon Jovi back in the day when it was just a, I know it's like almost like a country band now, but back in the 1980s, they they have a keyboard player that plays a lot. Whereas on the other hand, Iron Maiden, for example, has keyboard music in some of their songs, but they don't actually have a keyboard player as part of the band, like appearing on stage and everything. And in fact, what they do is they just have some guy off stage play the keyboard parts. That's true. So you just have to then, knowing that, imagine what the sound of a band like that might be. And certainly talented musicians, but what I would say is they want you to know that they're talented a little too much. And my singing teacher, who I meet with, this last Friday, I told her that I went to the concert. I told her this. I said, it's like that scene from Amadeus, the movie, where that king or whoever, played by Jeffrey Jones, is telling Mozart, there's just too many notes. And that's kind of the feeling that I got going to see Dream Theater, that they just kill you with music, with all the notes from the keyboard and the bass. I would say at some point it probably becomes a little too much for me and my taste. This is another reason why I would not go to see a lot of like well-known guitar players who do concerts like Joe Satriani, or even though I think Stevie Vai is a great guy, a fabulous musician, was great in Whitesnake and with David Lee Roth and everything. But I don't know if I want to go see him in concert by himself, soloing and everything else. I went and saw Yngwie a couple years ago, and that was plenty. Yngwie Malmsteen. That would be the complaint. And I know that I'm going to sound really, really old by saying this also with Dream Theater. Some of the songs, it's just hard to tell the difference. And I really, in the days leading up to the concert last week, pulled them up on Spotify, listened to a lot of music, and it didn't help a ton. So I'm glad I went. I had a great time. I just don't know if I would see them again. And really, the music they're doing these days is really geared toward the hardcore Dream Theater fan. It's, I don't think, really meant for the casual people who are just like, oh yeah, I know Dream Theater. They did that song Pull Me Under, that like the most popular song. They didn't even do that song on Wednesday night. But it was a fantastic night, great weather, good to see Dana, and I'm glad I went. So there's that. Moving on. I don't have any upcoming concerts, by the way. I don't think I have any tickets that I've bought for any upcoming concerts. I'll have to take a look into that as to who's coming to town and whether I want to see the band or whoever or not. I don't have anything on the schedule. Speaking of music, though, over the last couple weeks, I've made some breakthroughs in my singing. I was telling my best friend, one of my best friends, Brad, yesterday or the day before, how, I hadn't told him how my singing was going this past summer. And really it was because I had thought I had hit a plateau. I was a little worried about where this was all actually going. And I was doing a lot of practicing, but I would not say that I was seeing a lot of improvement. And then at the end of August, I was saying this to my singing teacher. Her name is Jacqueline. She's from Canada. And she had me go way, 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 way back to the basics of just worrying about how I'm using my, the air that you use to breathe and breathing from the diaphragm instead of trying to control all of the air and everything with your throat. And I'm actually doing these exercises where you do sit-ups while you're doing your scales. And really, that has just opened up so much in the last few weeks. I was like, wow. And the fun thing is, it's easier to do this stuff, these exercises, than it was what I was doing before, if that makes any sense. Once again, as with anything, don't practice harder, practice smarter. And I think for a little too time, I was practicing harder and I wasn't practicing very smartly, probably. And so the last few weeks, I've kind of, I think, got back on the right track. And even this past Friday, in my lesson I had last Friday morning, I think, Jacqueline even said, just thought, really doing well. And, I think that she was pleased with what I was able to do with those 3 weeks in between lessons and the suggestions that she gave me. So I'm once again excited that I think I've gotten past the plateau and moving forward again. Because like I said, there was a while there this summer where I was like, maybe I'm just not cut out for this, and maybe I'm not going to reach my goals that I want to reach. And now I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm going to reach those goals of being able to sing like all of these fantastic singers that I've liked for like 40 years now. Because that was originally why I started doing this, was listening to this music, whether it's Judas Priest or Iron Maiden or Dokken or Queensryche or whoever. And of course, not being able to sing any of it because those guys are just too good. And I just woke up one day about 2.5 years ago, and I was like, I wonder if I can sing like those guys. And that's what put me on this path. I just woke up one day and was like, I'm going to start taking some singing lessons. That's how it happened. And here we are 2.5 years later, and certainly my voice has improved, and still ways to go. And I know you're going to ask me, when are you going to sing for us, Ed? Well, I'll let you know. I'm not promising anything. I'm not giving you a date right now on September 15th of 2025. So that's going well. Enjoy practicing. And you should know, I practice for about an hour a day. I did it today for an hour. While I was practicing, I was watching the movie Zodiac on Tubi for about the 50th time. Moving on, something else that I think needs to be brought up. It was about a year ago that the first hurricane that ended up hitting this area pretty hard was seen on a map, seen on radar, and that was Hurricane Helene. That was the one that caused all the flooding out here on the road by my building. It was not the one that caused the damage to my car. That was Milton. But the first one, Helene, was the one that had all the flooding and the 4 or 5 feet of water that they had down in Madeira Beach and all that stuff that ended up having to be taken out of everybody's houses along this area and stacked along the streets. It was Hurricane Helene. Well, about a year ago is when it first appeared on radar, way, 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 way out there in the Atlantic. And luckily, there's nothing out there like that right now, I'm happy to say. So it's amazing how fast a year goes. And you probably remember me talking about all that, the power going out, me doing video and getting pictures and everything from a year ago. So let's see who's in here. And I think I'm now ready to jump into the topics for tonight's discussion. Hello, Linda. I've not been able to be in over a year. Finally have a day to relax. All right, Linda. Good to see you. Nephew Charlie, what's going on? Good to see you. D, must have been raining. It was not raining here, D. It was beautiful here today. Hello, Mary Jane. Amy. D says we need to talk after the show. All right, D, you'll have to send me a message through Messenger. Stephanie, what's going on with you? Are you going to sing for us? Like I said, Linda, not going to put that on any sort of date right now. Yes, everybody remember, hit the thumbs up button. I would appreciate it as you're watching, listening tonight. And I realize there are a lot of you who listen to this as a podcast tomorrow. So whoever's listening out there on Tuesday, September 16th, please be able to take some time to give this podcast a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever else. So let's get into the topics for tonight's discussion. And I might as well just go right to easily what will be, I think it's not going to be controversial, first of all. But being that it's been in the news, rightly so, and that was what I'm just going to call the murder. I know a lot of people have called it an assassination, and I'll get into that as well. But I'm just going to call it the murder of Charlie Kirk. Well known, at least in some circles. I vaguely knew he was, as probably all of you gather, just like any other American, I follow politics, at least on the fringes. I do my own bit of reading, but certainly none of it is relevant to doing this podcast. Zero. Even so, I just vaguely knew who he is or was. I had a general idea of what his main topics were and his ideas and everything, but I might have read maybe some quotes that he had made in the news or at some event or something like that, but surely never listened to him, surely never watched any videos of him, ever. Zero. And I became aware that he had been shot in Utah, whenever it happened, last Wednesday, just by somebody somewhere. Was it on Facebook? Maybe somebody is friends with me on Facebook or something like that, just with a, Charlie Kirk RIP. And I was thinking, well, he's kind of a young guy, so what happened there? And then, of course, I found out that he had been shot. We now know that the shooter, his name is Tyler Robinson, also from Utah, was caught, what I would say fairly quickly, given the circumstances. And he is now in custody. And of course, they have video of this guy, and they even have video of this guy scoping out what he was going to do even before he did it. So he actually visited the campus and gone to the building where he went up to the roof and shot. He'd done this, I think, even like the day before, scoped it all out, or earlier that day or something like that. So it wasn't like he just showed up and kind of winged it. This guy had a plan. Now, it wasn't a plan that was so good that he got away with it, and we're still all wondering who it was who did it. And I realized this is all going to be adjudicated in court. Is he going to plead not guilty or whatever? No idea at this point. But it does seem that they have the right person who did it. And once again, I'm not here to get into motivations or anything else. It's not what I do. Here's what I see, as best as I can tell, now learning more about the event and what Charlie Kirk was doing, going from place to place, whatever he was doing, speaking. And my understanding is this is quite common for him to do these speaking events. And I know there was clips that I've seen since then where he's like on college campuses, and some of these speaking engagements go pretty smoothly, and then some of them don't. We know how it is, no matter what kind of speaker you are. Anytime you're wading into politics and religion and everything else, there's going to be like 10 sides to an issue. But there's something that I've talked about on this podcast before, and it's called acceptance of deviance. And I don't mean deviance as in DEVIANTS, as deviance as in sexual predators and things like that. I mean deviance, DEVIANCE, when you use that term when it comes to statistics or meaning to stray from the norm. The deviance from the norm. And of course, this is a word that is used a lot in statistical analysis and probability. It's used in insurance when insurance companies are determining risk and things like that. And acceptance of deviance, what it means is when over time a person or a group gets comfortable with something that they probably shouldn't be doing. And you might remember this. I brought this up when was it? A couple years ago, when that woman who was always jogging at 6 in the morning, was it Louisville, Nashville, Memphis, one of those cities, that she had the habit of going out at 6 in the morning and running by herself in the city. You remember, some of you are surely remembering this now if you've been around the live show long enough. And my point was, there is nothing illegal, immoral, unethical about anybody running in a city at 6 in the morning by himself or herself. However, it's probably not the best idea. And I realize there's the attitude, well, I'm not, because why? Well, probably running in a city is probably you're more likely to be attacked or hit by a car, robbed, mugged, whatever you want to say. If you're a woman, raped, than if you're running out on some country road at 6 in the morning. It's still neither safe. Of course, country road, you could get hit by a car just as easily, narrow roads. But people do this. And I made the assessment regarding this woman who got unfortunately, she got attacked by a guy just cruising by in a minivan. He attacked her, took her away, raped her, then murdered her. Now, whether he had actually seen her running before in those mornings, unclear to me. I don't think there's any information out there on that. All we know is she intersected with him on that particular morning, and she died. And I get it that, for all you women out there, well, I'm not going to be imitated. I'm not going to live my life in fear and everything. I get it. I understand that. But is that really, really, really the smartest thing to do when instead you could run during the daylight? Or you could go to the gym and run on a treadmill. Or if you have other friends who like to jog, maybe you could jog as a group. If you have a man in your life, maybe he's not into running, but you can run and he can ride his bike and you can be together and he can watch out for you. Or women together, once again, watching out for each other. There are a lot better choices than, in fact, it's risk-wise, it's probably one of the worst choices. Once again, not illegal, not immoral, not unethical, just not smart. But like I said, when I talked about that, whenever that happened, probably what happened is she said, you know what? I'm going to start running in the morning. This is the easiest time to do it. It's dark out. It's cool out. I like running through the city. And probably the first few times when she's running down in that city by herself, she was nervous. She realized, this is really taking a risk. And she was really, really, really watching around for any problems. But after maybe the 10th time or the 20th time or the 50th time or the 100th time, she thought, well, you know what? Nobody even's following me. No weird guys have ever even come up to me. Nobody's really, nothing. And she probably ran the same route every day. Man, I must have picked a very, very safe route. And so she got comfortable for, it's one of those things, just because something bad hasn't happened doesn't mean something bad can't happen. And really, the fear or maybe the anxiety she might have had the first time she went out was correct. But the more you get away with that, the more the anxiety goes away, and the more you start thinking, oh, I was probably overstating how dangerous this was. When really, probably something bad just hadn't happened yet. You know, there are many examples of this with plane crashes, being that you all know that I know about plane crashes. Very well-known one out of Chicago, Flight 191. This is a jet that took off. There's a very famous picture with one of its engines missing. And it took off. As it was taking off, the left engine fell off. And eventually the airplane crashed into the ground, killed everybody on board and people on the ground, and was the most people killed in a plane crash in the United States, I think, until September 11th. That's how bad it was. Well, what had happened in that? Once again, acceptance of deviance. What happened is that the crew for American Airlines, the maintenance crew, they had found a shortcut to taking jets off planes. Instead of doing it the way the manufacturers said, they thought they figured out a better way to do it. And as long as you did it just really perfectly, it was okay. But if you didn't, problems started. And what they found out was that they had accepted this deviance, a deviance from the accepted way, because no other planes had crashed yet. They had gotten away with it. And then what do you know? This engine falls off. Everybody gets killed. And then when they started going back through the books, the NTSB and the FAA discovered American Airlines wasn't going by the book. They shouldn't have been doing what they were doing. Now, granted, in that case, it probably was immoral or illegal, but still, it's a very good example of acceptance of deviance. DEVIANCE. This is the way I look at the murder of Charlie Kirk. It's not exactly how I look at it. He's certainly a controversial figure. I'm not here to get into his politics. I don't care. I don't care. You know, I guess he would be called a conservative. I don't care if he was a liberal, communist, socialist, anarchist. I don't care. But he surely knew, and I think he even talked about all of the threats that he got and all the people who seemingly wanted to kill him. And I'm guessing when he started, and I might get my understanding, he's been doing this for a long time, doing these speaking engagements, sometimes inside, but sometimes outside. And he gets all these threats, and probably the first 10 times or 20 times, once again, just like the jogger, he was pretty nervous going out there, knowing that people want to kill him. Once again, I'm not here to support anybody who supports, I'm not here to support anybody killing anybody just because of words. I don't, of course, believe in that. And neither should you, no matter what the person is saying. But my guess is, after 10 times, after 20 times, who knows how many speeches he's done outside in open air venues over the years, then nothing ever happened. And I understand he has a security team, but once again, it's hard to stay, using a word from the movie Alien, stay frosty. If anybody's ever seen that movie, it's hard to stay frosty and alert and aware when nothing bad ever happens. I think that that's what happened here. I think my understanding is that he did have people around him who were looking out for his safety because of these threats and everything that he would get. But after a while, you start thinking, well, nothing's bad's happened yet. And here he's going to be in this open air venue. It's in Utah, probably a state that they start thinking, well, this is a state that kind of, votes in a certain way, and people have certain beliefs, and those that go along with Charlie, and they start convincing themselves that it's not as dangerous as it really is. And what happens? This guy, who was certainly not an expert killer, probably has never killed anybody before. My guess, he's probably never even shot anything from 200 yards away. Not only was, it was so obvious what Charlie Kirk and where he was going to be that day, that the killer could even show up the day before and scout things out. This is not smart. But it was so well planned ahead. There were going to be 3,000 people there. Charlie's going to be up on the stage and everything else, that he made it, and his group, his security detail, whoever else, made it very, very easy for him to be shot. They probably, when this all started, probably the most probably being suspicious of everybody. But then nobody ever attacked Charlie that I know of. Nobody ever, tried to get into a vent with a gun or something, whatever situations. You know who else this happened to? Salman Rushdie. You know who Salman Rushdie wrote the Satanic Verses, and then all the Muslims wanted to kill him and everything else. And of course, they never could track him down. Then all these years later, what happened? This just happened a few years ago. This is another very good example of acceptance of deviance. That there was a fatwa out because of what he said about the Muslim religion. And once again, I'm not here to get into that. But there were people who were looking out for him, wanted to kill him. And that happened way back in the 80s, early 90s. And those things, once they start, they don't end, until the job is done. Well, what happened? He shows up once again. I think it might have been at a university, and somebody went up to him, just sitting in the crowd, went up and attacked him. He didn't die, but he lost an eye, etc. How can that happen? Once again, why? Acceptance of deviance, not realizing that you're letting your guard down, not realizing, taking for granted that what you're doing has been working so far, not realizing that, no, it's not really working. It's just that it hasn't been challenged yet. That happened with Salman Rushdie. You can look that up. No, yeah. He didn't get murdered. Luckily, in my opinion, he survived it. But he was severely injured. He was lucky to survive. Unfortunately, Charlie Kirk did not. So this is the way I see his murder. He, along with his team, made it too easy for somebody to kill him. If you're going to be a person who is going to get threats, I don't care what you're doing. If you're going to get threats, I'll kill you if I see you. Oh, you're going to be there. I'm going to do this. Well, I want to do that. And I realize that there's a lot of talk on the internet that never happens. But probably you're best off taking all of it seriously and always being prepared to, and if you're going to have to be in public or somewhere, don't make it easy for whoever might be planning to kill you. And let's keep in mind, I think I read there were 3,000 people there. I don't know if you could fit that in an auditorium on that particular campus. I've been to that town, never been to that campus. Probably not. It's not a big, huge university where they could have maybe fit 3,000 people. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But it couldn't have been inside. It couldn't have been in a location where somebody couldn't shoot him from 200 yards away. It couldn't have been in a venue where there would be metal detectors. Hey, I went to see Dream Theater over here at the Sound. You got to go through metal detectors. Try getting into an NFL game, a sporting event, anywhere like that. Try getting in there with a gun or knife. Good luck to you. If you do, you're going to go to jail. It shouldn't have been happening. Whoever was supposed to be looking out for him did not do a very good job. And I have to also consider this. What is also very tragic about this is my understanding is Charlie Kirk, very popular. Once again, I'm not here to judge his values or anything else. Very popular guy. There were only 3,000 people there. That's, my understanding is that he has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of followers and everything else. Once again, I'm not judging not judging his political positions, but he was popular. Whereas I'm pretty sure if he had a speech to make that day and he wanted to get across his, whatever his viewpoint was and everything else, he could have done a YouTube live and he would have gotten 10 times that many. He could have gotten probably 30,000 people to tune in instead of 3,000 people showing up in person. You know, this is also what makes this all, and I realize you want to get out there and, you know, he runs a 501c3 and he has to raise money. So you got to go out there and do your, you know, your shtick, and you got to go out and shake hands and kiss babies and everything, just like a politician, even though he wasn't a politician. But doing it in an open air venue where the killer knew exactly where you're going to be like 36 hours before you were there is stupid. And I realize that, like I said, you know, you don't want to, I realize we can't live in fear. Well, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do, just like that jogger. She's going to go out and run. And if I'm going to let people start scaring me and everything, then what kind of life I'm living, I know. But I also think that Charlie Kirk probably wanted to live to the end of that day. And I also think that that jogger who got raped and murdered in that city while jogging, she probably wanted to live to the end of that day. The question is, what are you doing to make sure that that happens? And can you find a happy medium between your freedom and living to the end of that day? I think you can. I think you can. So this is what I've had a chance, like what, 5 days now to think about all of this. This did not need to happen. It didn't need to happen. There were other ways that Charlie Kirk could have met up with his followers. There are other ways he could have spoken to them. There are other ways that he could have said whatever he needed to say. And trust me, if he would have had it in an inside venue with metal detectors or just done a YouTube live, my impression is his followers would not have cared a bit. And if he would have told them the reason I have to do this is because I get threats, I'm a little worried, you know, I was going to appear at that college outside. And I started thinking better of it because I didn't think that my security was going to be, you know, too good. And there was no way to secure the entire perimeter. And, you know, with a high powered rifle, somebody might be able to shoot me. You know, all the threats that I get. All of his listeners and followers and viewers and supporters and donors and everything else would have perfectly understood. None of them would have thought, oh, that coward. Not one of them. Not smart. Don't do that. Don't do that. Now, there's the other side of this. What is the other side? The investigation side. Now, I did post this on my Facebook page. If only all disappearances and murder investigations were like what has gone on over the last 5 days. Of course, we know that's not what happened. And I think it, you know, given that, of course, all we do or talk about investigations on Unfound, investigations of disappearances, I will tell you that the investigation into Charlie Kirk's murder somewhat disgusts me. And I'll tell you why I mean that. Here's what I think I know. Instead of Charlie Kirk being on that campus, speaking to his supporters, 3,000 of them, and getting shot, instead, it's an engineering professor on that campus in one of the classrooms there. Let's say it's a 500-seat auditorium. I don't even know if that kind of place exists on that campus. I have no idea. This is just an example. But an engineering professor is up in front of his class. Somebody appears at the back door with a gun, shoots that professor, and takes off. Here's what I think I know. the FBI would not be involved. Even though it's on a campus, even though it would seem to have been a planned murder, even though that the murderer, they have video of him just like we had with this guy, Tyler Robinson, coming on campus and everything else. Here's what I know. I don't think the FBI would have been involved. But because of who, and remember, I'll reiterate it again, Charlie Kirk was not a politician, and the way, I know most of you are Americans, some of you aren't, but the way we do things in the United States as far as government goes is that our representatives, our senators, and the president are representations of us. No matter who the president is, when he, and maybe we'll have a woman one of these days, I have no problem with that, goes to another country, he or she is representing the country of the United States. He or she is representing all of us. When you vote for your representatives or your senator and they go to Washington, D.C. and they're on Capitol Hill, that's basically all groups of Americans appearing in there at one time. That's how our system of government works. So when you have a politician, I know that's a negative term, but you know what I mean, a representative, senator, president, other maybe elected officials, a governor, whoever, if one of them is shot or attacked, it's considered in our form of government, the way we look at government in the United States, that is considered to be an attack on the American people. Because these are elected officials representing us, doing the business of the people, whether you like it or not. And so I understand in those situations where we throw absolutely everything, all law enforcement agencies, FBI, state police, local police, CIA, whoever it takes to try to figure out what happened. But Charlie Kirk was just a private citizen. Okay? That's all he was. No different than all of you, no different than me, no different than that engineering professor I just used from a couple minutes ago. But because of what he was talking about and the friends he has, and once again, I'm not here to get into the politics of it. If it was all like the opposite party and the opposite ideology or everything else, this would all still be happening. It would still be bad. And because of connections and what he's doing and what he was saying and what his business was. Remember, he was a businessman. He was the president of a 501c3. He was not Mother Teresa. He's just a businessman talking up in front of a bunch of people. He gets shot he's a private citizen who caught shot on a college campus. He gets the whole thrust of the Utah government and the federal government trying to figure out who killed him. Whereas a professor whose actual job is on that campus and might have been there 20, 25 years, what does he probably get? He gets the local police, and that's it. And then everybody sits around and wonders why everybody is so dang jaded about justice and police and investigations and politics in the United States. When some private citizens get more attention for crimes against them than others. It's pretty clear to me, I think, even though you know my opinion on police, I think I've voiced it especially regarding disappearances. That's because that's what I do. Given what we know about this particular murder and Tyler Robinson and everything else, this guy was not some supervillain or anything. I'm pretty sure the local police, along with maybe some help from the sheriff's office and the state police of Utah, could have done just fine tracking down Tyler Robinson. I'm pretty sure. Given that this was really, really not that sophisticated a crime. Why? Because of what I said before. Really, Charlie Kirk and his group around him made it easy for this person. Don't make it easy. If you are somebody out there who is controversial, I don't care if it has to do with politics, religion, video games, entertainment, music, and you get threats and everything, and you actually believe them, don't make it easy for the people who hate you. You're only doing them a favor. So I'm disgusted with the investigation. I'm here to tell you that I think that if, all these disappearances that we've featured on Unfound, we're coming up on number 377, by the way, this Friday. I'm pretty sure if all of those people who went missing were Charlie Kirk's, a lot of them would have been solved. But because a lot of those people weren't a Charlie Kirk, they're unsolved. Pretty sure. And that disgusts me. Here in the United States, everybody is supposed to be equal. I know it's, that's really a tough goal to reach. And I don't know if the United States will ever, no matter who's president, who the representative, I don't know if we'll ever really, really, really reach that. Okay? Because we as humans, we're so imperfect. But this just seems like a very egregious example of favoritism, I think. Pretty sure. Now, I realize for all the people who are supporters of him, they love it. Oh, well, he deserved it. He was a good guy and everything else. That's not the way everybody should be looking at it. This is a crime like any other murder, whether it happens in downtown Chicago on a Saturday night or on the campus in Utah. Private people being murdered for whatever group they're in. Charlie Kirk was seen as being part of a particular group, and it seems he was shot because of it. Same way in downtown Chicago, you have gang shootings. Somebody is a part of a particular group. There's another group who doesn't like that group, and so they're going to kill him. Same thing. But the FBI isn't falling all over themselves to get, I realize what's been going on politically, and I realize that. But I think you know what I'm talking about. It shouldn't be this way. If private people are going to be murdered, you got to pick a way and just stick to that way and make it even for everybody. Or people get jaded, as they already are, and it just gets worse. So that's really my insight, once again, from a crime point of view, from a true crime point of view, from an investigation point of view, into Charlie Kirk's murder. I don't call it, I know some people call it, well, it's an assassination. What? I realize there's the Webster's definition. Does it rise to that level? He's not an elected official. He's not an elected official. He wasn't a governor or anything else. He wasn't the Pope. He was the head of a 501c3 organization that he started himself that did a lot of politicking and did a lot of raising of money and things like that. Well, let's say another leader of a 501c gets murdered somehow. Is that an assassination too? I have a following, certainly not as big as Charlie Kirk's. If I get murdered like he got murdered, is it an assassination? I'm going to tell all of you right now, if that ever happens, I don't consider it to be an assassination. All right? I don't, even though I have a following. Not as big as Charlie Kirk's. I have 8,000 some people in the discussion group. I got almost 19,000 followers on YouTube or whatever else. If I get shot, it's not an assassination. It's just a murder. I'm okay with that. I just want all of you to know. Let's see what everybody is saying here. Linda's saying she uses a taser when she goes running. Good for you, Linda. Maybe you have to worry, Linda, for women. You need a weapon that you can use from a distance. A taser, it's no guarantee. I don't know how you feel about guns. I'm not here to force anybody. If you don't like guns, fine by me. But remember, for women, it's very important that you have a weapon that you can use from distance. And tasers, you watch enough videos on YouTube, Linda, about tasers, you'll see how many times police use them. And of course, they're trained to use them and how often they don't work. Keep that in mind. Linda keeps her head on a swivel. Stephanie, all politics aside on the topic, I said the same thing. An indoor venue can be surveilled much more easily. Weird choice to do it outdoors. Linda, hopefully people will learn from this. Derek, I always enjoy your input in subject matters such as Charlie's murder. Stephanie, yes, some families of regular people go missing after resort to conducting their own investigations because they can't get help. True. Checking in from the Walnut Valley Festival. You're missing a good show, Lisa. Unfortunately, you'll just have to catch it in the rewind. And Nurse Ratchet says, I agree, Ed. Well, thanks. I like it when people agree with me. The only thing I will add to this before I move on to Robin Graham's disappearance is that the media, and I'm part of the media, like it or not, I am. They'll do everything in their power to inflame you. Okay, they'll talk about there's a war going on and everything else in this country. And there is no war going on. Okay. I could almost believe that they want one to happen so they can cover it. But there's no war going on. Okay, there are just differences of opinion. Is there some violence? Yes. But here in 2025 is nothing compared to what was going on, for example, in the late 60s with the protesting of the Vietnam War and everything else. It is nothing compared to that. Not even a blip on the U.S. history radar compared to what was going on in the 1960s. And if when we go back to the 1950s with segregation and, of course, blacks being sprayed with fire hoses and everything else, all disgusting. What we have going on here is nothing compared to all of that. And then, of course, the ultimate is the American Civil War. Somehow we made it through that. We'll make it through this. Do not allow them to inflame you. Do not allow them to scare you. Don't do that. All right. Do not give them, they know how much they have the power to scare you. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. Make smart decisions. Make smarter decisions than Charlie Kirk and his team did last Wednesday. I feel horrible. Totally avoidable. Totally avoidable. Did not need to happen. The blame goes to the shooter. The reason Charlie Kirk is dead is because of that guy that shot him. But for all the rest of us, decent people, our job is to not make it easy on others who are bad to harm us. Don't make it easy. Moving on. Robin Graham. You might have seen that in the title and said, who the heck is Robin Graham? I've never heard of her. And probably because I don't think that there's ever been a podcast or anything covering her, because there's really not a ton of information other than at some point, I think once in a while, people have tried to connect her disappearance to the Zodiac Killer. And coincidentally, I've been watching the Zodiac on Tubi because it's free. But some people have tried to connect her to that, even though this is down in the LA area. The Zodiac was up there in the San Francisco area. But I'm going to give you what I think about that in a moment. I've listened to preachers. I've listened to fools who make their own rules. One person conditioned to rule and control. The media sells it, and you live the role. Yes, we're going off the rails on a crazy Train, absolutely true. Great lyrics from the now deceased Ozzy Osbourne. Derek, I've been thinking what you've been thinking about the media for years. I flip between the three major news works, and it's nothing but outrageous, inflammatory commentary. Yeah. I follow the news. I don't watch any of the channels. I read my news. You know why I read my news? Because it takes the emotion out of it. I actually read words. If you watch the news, you're more likely to be emotionally involved because those people really know how to do it. But when you just read the news, actually like reading a newspaper from 30 years ago, it's funny how you will probably view things a little more rationally. It's weird how that works. I haven't, unless it's been something like really outrageous, like a plane crash or something like what happened, in Washington, D.C. with the planes crashing, in the helicopter and the jet. Other than that, I do not watch TV news, YouTube news, nothing, zero. Even with disappearances, I read all the news. That's what I do. You might try that. Takes more time, but it's worth it. All right. Robin Graham was last seen by California Highway Patrol officers. Remember that. At approximately 2 a.m. on November 15th of 1970. I was 3.5 months old. Sorry. Beside the vehicle she had been driving on the shoulder of the southbound Hollywood Freeway near the Santa Monica Boulevard off-ramp in L.A. Graham had been out on a date Saturday night and got a ride back to her car at 1:45 a.m., which was parked at her workplace, Pier 1 Imports. While heading home, her vehicle stalled at 2 a.m. Graham was last seen receiving mechanical assistance from a dark-haired white male who was estimated to be in his mid-20s and who drove a late 1950s model Chevy Corvette C1. So the first iteration of the Corvette. This would have been the model before the split window in the early 60s. It was pale blue or green with primer. The man appeared to try and help Graham get the car started, but gave up, and they both rode off in his car. I want you to remember all of that. Graham had earlier used a call box, and I think maybe call boxes still exist out there, to ask a CHP emergency operator to let her parents know she had run out of fuel. Graham's younger sister took the call and relayed the information to her parents upon their return home at approximately 2:30 a.m. They were immediately to the site where they found Robin's car, but she had disappeared and the vehicle was left locked and abandoned. No note was found on her locked car. The CHP, California Highway Patrol, that's where the show Chips, remember? CHP officers had seen Graham several times earlier and spoke with her, but had not stopped when they saw her talking with the young man. The patrolmen assumed he was the help for which she had called. The CHP officers were acting in accordance with policy at the time. As a result of this case, CHP policy was changed to ensure the safety of stranded female motorists. The initial missing persons report had Graham leaving voluntarily in the Corvette, but the CHP officer who made that report was re-questioned, and he said he saw her in the presence of the man and that she had appeared to have gotten into the man's car willingly. Now, I will say once again, the reason I picked out this particular disappearance is because this is one where it at least seems on the surface that this woman got picked up by a stranger. How many times does that come up in Unfound disappearances? Of course, Mara Murray and many others. And of course, we've had a couple where maybe that was the case, but they're kind of different. In fact, the only case I think that might be actually really, really, really close to Robin Graham's is Sue Swedell's. Remember Sue Swedell's from the 1980s up there in Minnesota? She had gone to work. On her way home, the car overheated. She pulled into a gas station, called her family saying what happened. And then a witness at the gas station, I believe an employee, said that a car pulled in beside Sue's. The guy in the car and Sue talked. She willingly got into this car and left. never to be seen again. It was only discovered later that somebody, seemingly on purpose, had unscrewed the bottom of her radiator, so all of the radiator fluid would leak out of it and the car would eventually overheat. This was a sabotaged car, probably by the guy who ended up picking her up. All right, so similar. Whereas like with Paige Rinkowski, you remember her disappearance, where, of course, she was on the side of the highway in Michigan. There was nothing wrong with her car. Still, it was there, and there were many people who reported that she was seen on the side of the road talking to at least one guy. Didn't seem like they were arguing. Of course, people were flying by maybe at 60 miles an hour. How can you even tell? But later, her car was found there. There was nothing wrong with the car. In fact, it was still idling. And she was never seen again. Of course, that disappearance goes back, I think, to the 1990s, still unsolved. They have a description of the car, this minivan of type minivan. She's still missing, but really not the same thing because it wasn't a breakdown. But certainly probably the person who took her was a stranger. Kate, hi. Hello to you, Kate. And D, sorry, I missed part of that. All right, well, I'm not going back over it, D. You're just going to have to, I'm not going back over. You missed it. I'm sorry. So we have Sue Swedell probably is similar. But I wanted to bring this up just to give you an example, because I know so many people think, well, you know, all these cases of women, cars on the side of the road and getting, you know, some stranger. I don't even think that this is what happened with Robin Graham. Now, what do I mean? Well, here are some of the things that catch my attention when I read both there's actually a Wikipedia page and on her disappearance. And there's also, of course, the Charlie Project. And I did some newspaper.com searches. Here are the items that catch my eye. And the first one should have been very obvious to you if you were paying attention to what I read. It seems that a cop actually saw her getting into the car with this guy. And the CHP officer said she appeared to get into the car willingly. Now, I want to ask you a question. Do you really think if this guy intended to kill her, that he would really allow her to get in a car with a cop sitting there? I realize it's night. I realize maybe I guess there's the possibility that this guy in this Corvette maybe didn't see the cop sitting there. She didn't see the cop sitting there, I suppose. But this bothers me. I'm going to come back to that. But you have to think about that. It's clear from all of the accounts of this that a cop saw her get into a car. And remember, she went missing. So presumably, seemingly, whoever was in that car probably killed her for whatever reason. But just goes some other things. How many primered early Corvettes could there have been at the time? It seems like a very, very distinctive type of vehicle. Of course, that hasn't helped with the disappearance of Sherry Mahan, who allegedly, seemingly, maybe got picked up by someone driving a conversion van with a skier on the side. You'd think that would be pretty obvious as well. That disappearance is unsolved. And I've even gone so far when I've talked about her disappearance. In fact, maybe even this year, I discussed her disappearance. I've kind of decided that van doesn't even exist. I think this is something that someone made up. I know, crazy. So, but how many primered Corvettes of that color could there have been at the time? Not many. You also have to understand she dismissed help seemingly from multiple police officers who stopped to help her. And instead, she willingly got in a Corvette with a guy who she most likely did not know. Once again, I realize we can't go by logic. You know me. I try to shy away from that. This just seems unlikely. For her to turn down, multiple people stopping, and then she decides to go with this guy right after she called her parents to tell them where she was. Why would she do that? Why would you call your parents and tell you where you are and then not call them back and say, hey, I'm getting a ride with somebody and here's where we're going? Remember, this is well before cell phones started or were invented, where they probably invented, just nobody was using them yet. It took a while. You have to think about that. In addition, we don't know what the problem was with her car. It's interesting in going back and reading articles about her disappearance and maybe others like her, how many problems there were with cars back then. We forget here in the 21st century how reliable cars are compared to cars back at the time. It very well may be that back then cars were more works of art and people were very nostalgic about 1950s and 1960s cars and how they looked and the fins and the engines and, and everything else. But they were not reliable. The problem, though, with Robin's disappearance is I couldn't find it anywhere. Well, what was the problem with her car? Don't know. All it says is it stalled. Well, that could be a lot of different reasons. Did she run out of gas? Did the alternator go? Did the battery go? Did the transmission go? Did it throw a rod? Was there not enough oil in it? I have no idea. I don't know what happened to the car. No idea. No information on that. But it might help us to assess the situation. Certainly it helps us assess the situation with Sue Swedell. Being that we know that somebody on purpose drained the radiator in her car, well, this was a setup. It was staged. Somebody set that whole thing up for whatever reason. Probably somebody who knew Sue, by the way. So knowing what was wrong with the car can certainly be helpful. And I even have here, could this have been so we have to think, well, could Robin's, the breakdown of her car, could it have been a setup? Well, we don't know because we don't know what was wrong with the car. If we were to find out that her radiator was drained as well, then yes. Whereas something like a transmission or something, then probably not. Probably not. I'm going to give you my insight on this now that I've gone through all of this. Even though, once again, I think all these years it has been pretty much accepted that a stranger took her. My insight is I think a cop did it. I think that either one of the cops who actually stopped to help her that night, or most likely, this cop who said he saw her get into a Corvette and drive off, whoever that police officer is would be my number one suspect or perpetrator of this disappearance, because I'll go back to what I said. I find it highly unlikely that a guy would really pick up a woman on the side of the road with a cop sitting how far away. Once again, I've probably been to this exit. I've been to LA enough times, and I've been to Santa Monica enough times way back in the day. And I've been on the Hollywood freeway. I've probably been at this exit. I can't remember. But it's not like this is out in the middle of nowhere and flat roads and everything else. If a police officer really saw this happen, he couldn't have been that far away. Would a killer really pick up a woman who he was probably planning to kill with a cop sitting right there? with his primered, quote unquote, primered Corvette, with the cop maybe even writing down the license plate number. That's stupid. But seemingly that's the police officer's story. I think a police officer did this. Now, the good news is there is evidence that this could be true, even though it happened years later. And I don't think that this particular cop was on the beat in 1970. But how many of you have ever heard of the murder of Kara Knott? K-N-O-T-T. How many of you have ever heard the murder of Kara Knott? See, I knew about this, even though it's a murder. And see, I will continue to insist, if you want to be a good analyst of murders and disappearances, you have to have the Rolodex up here of many, many, many solved and unsolved murders and disappearances. Just have to. And you have to know them fairly well. You don't have to know all of Unfound's 377 cases, but having a good, really strong knowledge of about 50 very diverse types of crimes and incidents solved and unsolved is really, really probably going to help you be a really good analyst and really pick out the things that are important very quickly. D says, oh, yes, sir. Murder of Kara Knott. This happened in 1986. What eventually happened is she was going somewhere. She didn't make it there. Eventually, her car was found pushed over an embankment in LA on a freeway at some dead end or something. They were doing an extension or something that wasn't completed. Her car was found pushed over an embankment, and she was found not far away. She had been strangled to death. And everybody's trying to figure out what happened. Well, right after this news came out of Kara not being found deceased, a bunch of women started calling police, calling in saying, hey, I've had problems with a cop on that same stretch of highway. And they figured out or doing this or doing that. But really what he was trying to do was get dates with these women. Now, can you see why I'm thinking, going back to Robin Graham and thinking this as see why I can't rule out the idea that this was a cop. If we're just some year now, granted, this is 1986. Robin Graham goes missing in 1970. But Craig Pyre was pulling over random females, looking for a particular type, pulling them over, and then trying to get dates with them. And he obviously did this with Kara, and of course, he went to trial, did not, and was found guilty. He had, this was obviously something that wasn't planned because of all the mistakes he made in trying to cover it up. But they believe, being that Craig has never admitted to killing her, even though he went to trial, was found guilty. Although I think it was a hung jury the first time around, if you can believe it. What they believe happened is he pulled Kara over. She figured out what was going on, and she threatened to, go to his superiors or whatever else. And he got worried about that and decided to kill her instead. But this guy, Craig Pyre, my understanding, had pulled over many, many women before he ever came across Kara Knott, who he ended up killing. Now, you should know the bizarre part about this is that between the time that Kara was found murdered and Craig being charged, the local news, I guess, in San Diego, thank you, Amy, they did a story about women being safe on the highways, and guess who the local news did a ride along with? If you can believe this, Craig Pyre. I mean, it is so bizarre. And you can still find that video on YouTube. And you can see in the video, there are scratches on his faces. And and he had told everybody this story that he fell into a fence or something, those were probably the scratches from Kara. Not most like absolutely they were when she was trying to fight him. She scratched him. He ended up killing her. The scratches you see on his face in that news report where he's cruising around talking, oh yeah, women really, they got to watch themselves out here. It's not safe out here, even though he's pulling over women left and right for dates. You can find that. Do you after the show's done, of course. You can find that. You know, I mean, you talk about bizarre. You talk about creepy. They did a report because of Karen Knott's murder, and little did they know the reporter was riding around with the actual murderer. So simply put, when a cop admits seeing Robin Graham get into someone's car, that's enough for me to think that probably whoever this cop witness was is just creating an alibi for himself. I didn't do it. I was sitting there and I saw her get into a car. I had nothing to do with it. As if a killer would really pick up and take a woman away with a cop sitting there. But, you know, cops are believed. And I have no idea if this angle on her disappearance has ever been examined. I have no idea. But being that I've known about her disappearance for a long time, well before Unfound got started, I have to admit that I've always thought that a cop did it. So going back to, you know, talking about the main topic of what are the odds of women getting, you know, their cars breaking down and getting picked up by strangers who are killers. In my opinion, I don't think that Robin Graham's is a very good example because of everything that I just said. Yes, the cop, I guess, generically would be considered a stranger, I guess. But I think when people think about getting picked up by a stranger, I think they're thinking about, you know, somebody who's not a cop, who's just driving by, whether it be a construction worker or an accountant or a teacher, and then happens to see some woman by herself, and the guy is maybe already has a criminal record or something, and then sees his next victim. I don't think that's what happened to Robin Graham. I think that a cop did this. I think that witness, he might have gone by before, saw she was alone, offered her help. Other cops came by, and then he pulled around and finally convinced her to get in his car with him. Or I might even be open to the idea that he got off work right back and went right back to that spot where she was and says, hey, remember me? I was the cop who stopped by. You're still out here. Just get in here. We got to get you off the highway. We got to get you out of here. This is no good. You're going to be here all night. I could be open to that as well. I don't think this primered Corvette, I don't think it exists at all. I think the guy made it up. Fairly sure. Fairly sure. So I urge you to look into Robin Graham's disappearance as well. Like I said, it has a Wikipedia page. It has a the Charlie Project page. And I know there are articles on newspapers.com if you'd like to read any articles over the years that have been written about her disappearance. If you've never heard about it before, it's one that you should really add to that Rolodex in your head. It should be. All right, moving on. I need to get to, yes, the rapper 50 Cent. Do they say rappers anymore? Is it hip hop artists? I don't even know. I'm showing my age here. Jacqueline, she either got in the car willingly or she didn't. I'm suspicious about how the cop said that. Yeah, me too, Jacqueline. Right. I think he said it. I mean, obviously that would be a way for him to really, this cop to really establish a good alibi. Yeah, I'm out here and she got in this guy with his Corvette. What do you want me to do? But did anybody not pause to think, would somebody really do that? Would a killer really do that? With a cop sitting, I don't know, 100 yards away, like I said, how far, if the cop was close enough to see that it was a primered Corvette and it was a particular color at night, the cop had to have been pretty close. And this killer still picks her up. It seems unlikely. So maybe there's something to that. Thank you, Jacqueline. Once again, everybody, as you were watching, we got 35 minutes left. Please give this show tonight a thumbs up if you've not yet done so. Subscribe to the channel if this is the first time for you. Do all those good things. 50 Cent is going to be hosting his own true crime program on the Fox channel. As you can imagine, this, to me, takes away a lot of seriousness from these cases. You know, this is only, he's only being used, the question is does even anybody even know who he is anymore? He's not like Snoop Dogg, who seems to be in all commercials. Him, Kevin Hart, and Walton Goggins. Man, those three, they do not believe in being overexposed, man. I guess they'll just do anything. Any commercial, whatever, they'll just do anything. I guess you got to get the money while the getting's good. But, I would feel this way about all sorts of famous people doing something like this. Is that, what is it? Are the crimes or whatever it's going to be on this program, are those not enough to bring people to watch the show? This is the reason, although I never have talked about CrimeCon. I know it just happened here within the last couple weeks, and I had it on my agenda to talk about, and I never got to it because I had so many other interesting things to discuss. This is one more reason that I don't go to CrimeCon. You know why? Because people that run CrimeCon, and a lot of people who, are supporters of CrimeCon and everything else, probably just think this is like the best idea in the world. There's nothing good about this. There's nothing good. This trivializes crimes. If they want to do a true crime program and they want to have a real reporter on there, what's the guy? I know that he was, I forget his name. Matthew Perry's, what was this? His stepfather. It was Matthew Perry's mother married that guy. He's still alive, I think, still does true crime shows. What is it? On Dateline or whatever else. If they wanted to get him or several of these other people who have hosted programs over the years, I get that. They're at least journalists. They've done different things, and this is kind of their thing. Get it. Putting somebody like 50 Cent in there as the host or everything completely trivializes the whole dang thing. This, as I have in my notes right here off to my right, this is CrimeCon thinking. This is why I don't go. This is why I don't go. I realize that there are certain people who I highly, highly, highly respect who do go to CrimeCon. I know some of you go to CrimeCon. I know many in Unfound's audience go to CrimeCon. Julia Colley had it set up. I saw pictures of her at CrimeCon and a few other hosts that I really respect. But I don't like it. I've took the time years ago to look up the company that runs it. They're an entertainment company. And the very second CrimeCon doesn't make any money, they'll be out of there. They'll put on a good show until one of these days, if ever, the money doesn't come in for one of them, and they'll just they'll just do something else. And I just can't get with that. As you know, Keith Morrison, thank you, Amy. I knew somebody would put it in the comments. Keith Morrison, thank you. I don't know. I guess I just must have a different attitude about doing this job compared to a lot of others. I don't, this is a show. When I'm doing here on Monday nights, a little more laid back, there might even be some humor put in once in a while, maybe once in a while, some things. And of course, I talk about things going on in my private life and everything. But this doesn't exist if the podcast doesn't exist. And certainly something we don't do on the podcast is joke around about disappearances. I consider that to be a news program. It is not entertainment. And so I know I'm showing my age here, but when I'm doing Unfound, the podcast, I don't look at myself as, like you might think of an entertainer, like a stand-up comedian or a rock star or somebody like that, where I'm here, I'm on stage and I'm entertaining all of you by interviewing somebody and you're the audience and all of that. That's not the way I look at it. I consider myself to be a reporter. I consider myself, once again, showing my age, I'm much more akin to Walter Cronkite or Dan Rather or Peter Jennings or Tom Brokaw or somebody like that than, like I said, a stand-up comedian or a musician or actors in a play or something like that. I'm here to deliver disappearance news through interviewing people to you. I also see myself as a teacher. As I am learning, hopefully all of you are learning. And I certainly have a long way to go. I think probably, all of you have a long way to go in our disappearance education. So I see it as a news program. I see it as a class. I do not see it as an entertainment show. But my opinion is that many hosts do. And so when I think of this as being a reporter, did Walter Cronkite ever go to a convention to meet his viewers? Did he ever do that? Did Dan Rather, and I realize that, maybe these days some of these people aren't thought very highly or whatever, it's considered old media and everything. Did they go to some sort of convention to meet their viewers so they could get pictures taken with them and everything else? I just don't think so. And so when I think about 50 Cent or anybody else that they may want to get for future shows or things like that, it just thumbs down everything severely, and it totally takes the importance and the serious of all of this totally out of it. Kate agrees. Keith Morrison, Stephanie, I feel bad for the families who have to witness the worst moments of their loved one's life being presented for shock value or entertainment. Right. Amy agrees with Stephanie. There just seems to be, to me, certainly not illegal, but it does challenge my sense of morality and my sense of ethics for stuff like this. It just does. I like I said, I don't know why, because, the thing is, maybe it's because I'm one of the few people who run a podcast, the True Crime Podcast, the Serious Podcast, who actually has an entertainment background. I think that John Lorden does as well, maybe. But I know what entertainment is. What I do at Unfound is not entertainment. It's not. It's just not. Entertainment is something that is geared toward the guests. When people, as the example I always give, like Def Leppard. Millions of people have loved Def Leppard music over the years. But here's what I know. Def Leppard shows up for a concert and they don't do Pour Some Sugar on Me. There's going to be a lot of pissed off people. That's entertainment. Where you have to gear your what you're going to do, the music you're going to play, the jokes you're going to tell, the movies you're going to make and everything. When you're gearing it to the audience, that's entertainment. Whereas I've said over and over, I love all of you, but there's not one decision I make with Unfound where I take your thoughts into consideration. Not one. Not one. My first thought is to the guest, the person who has agreed to talk to me. My concern is them first. That's not entertainment. So with 50 Cent being on, being these entertainment, this is entertainment. And it's disgusting. It's one of those things where you see it and you're like, this can't be true. And it is. I mean, you wonder who that Fox Corporation, was it 20th Century Fox, whatever they're called. You wonder who it was that came up with that idea. Just woke up one day and said, you know what? Wonder what 50 Cent is doing these days. We're going to do it. Somebody has pitched a true crime TV show to me. And then the next thought is, I haven't seen 50 Cent around town recently. Wonder what he's doing. You wonder how these things happen. Because it sucks. It just sucks. It's not good. And I continue to say, there is a reason that people in law enforcement don't take podcasts and true crime YouTube channels and these shows seriously. This is one of the reasons. And I know that I've, run up against this, myself, that I just get thrown in with all of these other people who want to put 50 Cent as the host of a true crime program. And it's, what are you going to do? I'm here by choice. What are you going to do? I guess I can leave anytime I want. But it's hard to fly like an eagle when you're surrounded by a bunch of turkeys. And that's just the way I feel. I know this sounds arrogant and everything, but I can't put it any other way. Whereas I think my attitude toward these types of things, like going back to my indie filmmaking days, was that there were other, I was part of a group of filmmakers in Las Vegas in the early 2000s, from like 2000 to 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. And there were other groups in town making independent movies. Now, I'm, of course, a very competitive guy in everything that I do. And I wanted our work to be better than theirs. Now, our work wasn't very good, and I'll be the first one to admit that all these years later. But I knew I wanted those other groups to make good movies because I thought that was good for everybody. If there was a filmmaking group in Las Vegas that could make a really good movie that got some traction, maybe at the Sundance Film Festival or something like that, I believed that more people with actually film money might take, maybe a longer look at what is being done in Las Vegas, and there's anybody else doing some good work there that they might be interested in working with. Unfortunately, that never happened. Everybody who was making movies in Las Vegas in the early 2000s sucked, including my group. I could say that now. This is the way I feel about podcasting, true crime podcasting. If we had a lot more people that were better and more serious, then all of us would be taken more seriously. But we're not taken seriously because too many people don't take it seriously enough. It's the way of the world. That's the way things work. No way to avoid it. All right, moving on. I do have to mention this, some very sad news. Usually would not mention the death of a listener, but this was a very unique listener. Her name was Charmin Harp, and she was the woman who organized the Tom Brown meetup in Amarillo going way back to July of 2019. I cannot believe it was over 6 years ago. I even had short hair back then. I can not believe it's been that long. But if you remember, this was, of course, after, to put this in the timeline of all the Tom Brown stuff, this was after Tom's 30% of his remains were found. This was also right after the Tom Brown signs had been ripped down in town. And of course, they eventually figured out who was doing that. This was just after that she contacted me. She wanted to help Penny out and Tom's family. And she got a bunch of people to come together in Amarillo. She got local news to show up. And she talked to me about it. And I told her, I'll be there. And she was the only one who knew I was coming. I think that Tom Brown's mother, Penny, also knew. This is when Penny and I were actually talking. And I showed up for that meetup. I forget, it was at some restaurant in Amarillo. And I showed up by surprise and walked in there and shocked everybody. And then I ended up spending a couple days in the area. I did go to Canadian, Texas. I rode around with Penny, and there was some other woman there, and Tom's brother. We rode around. She showed me all the locations where Tom got gas, where the Durango was found, where his remains were found, where the backpack, rolled all over town. That was all arranged by Charmin Harp. So she has a hyphenated last name. Antel HARP. Charmin Harp. She arranged all of that. She died this past week. My insight is that even maybe before Amarillo, I think that she maybe was a person who had struggled with some health issues. And I had not talked to her in a while. We certainly followed each other online. I would see when she would post things, but I hadn't, like I said, I had not talked to her in a while. And it's one of those things you just regret it. Just like I was talking a couple weeks ago when I was talking about the sister of Jennifer Condon, Iris, who died over a year ago, and I didn't even know it. And I'm very embarrassed by that. But I had talked to her, and she had told me she had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And of course, I didn't tell anybody about that. And I got to thinking, well, what did happen to that? And then she's dead. It sucks. It sucks. It hurts every time. But then once again, we have Charmin, who did a lot, brought attention to Tom's case, his disappearance, his death, and really organized a very, very good event. The local news showed up, interviewed Penny. I was on there as well. I think it's on the YouTube channel here somewhere, that clip of me talking to local news. And I talk about how the person who tore down those signs needs to be found. And guess what? The person was eventually identified. Had nothing to do with Tom's disappearance. And I know after that, Charmin and I had even talked about doing another meetup, kind of doing it all over again. I forget, but COVID happened. And then frankly, of course, all the Phil Klein stuff, and me, frankly, being estranged from Tom's family because of that, just couldn't make it happen. And then it does seem to me the last year or two, Charmin had obviously been struggling with some health issues. I don't know specifically what. I don't know why she died, but I did see that people offering condolences, posting on her page, and all of that. So it's very, very sad. Very, very sad. Don't know how old she was or anything. Yeah. Yeah. Charmin is actually, it's Charmin. It's not like the paper towels or the tissues. Charmin. Charmin. Antel Harp was her name. You can find her Facebook. I hope she rests in peace. Like I said, I can't believe that it's been that long ago. It's that month that was right after I moved into this place where I live now. And I can't remember what was first. Was it that month, within 2 weeks, there was me going to Amarillo and back. And then also my buddy Doug flying to, not Miami, but like Fort Lauderdale, Florida, me picking him up and us going to the Iron Maiden concert. That was the first time he saw Iron Maiden. It was my second time. We went and saw them down there. And then, we hung out. We went and shot guns the next day. We had a good time. We always talk about doing that again, if not got it done. But luckily I got to see him back when I was up in Pennsylvania in June. That was a great time. But that all happened like over a 2-week span. It was really a whirlwind of time, the way I remember it, back there in, I wasn't even 50 yet. You go back and see that video of me appearing on local news. I was just at that point starting to let my hair grow more longer than it ever been. And it was not looking good at all. And it was a work in progress. Oh, those were the days. Amarillo is not close, but it's like I think it's like a 33-hour drive from here. And I actually drove, maybe it's not that far, but I actually drove like 22 hours straight or something. And I ended up pulling off at a rest area. Maybe it's not 33. Maybe it's more like 27 hours or something. I stopped with like 5 hours to go and took a snooze at a rest area and then finished it the rest of the drive, a few hours later. But did the same thing coming back where I drove many hours, then took a snooze and then made it the rest of the way. What a drive that was. It was a good time. And I took pictures, did some video. I think that's still up here on the YouTube channel from that time. And I have fond memories of meeting Charmin and meeting listeners who didn't know that I was going to be there and sitting around. I had a good meal and just met everybody that was there. It was a good time, even though we were there under, of course, bad circumstances. So Charmin, once again, I hope she rests in peace. It was a pleasure getting to know her, and she did a fantastic job with that. Moving on, I had announced like 2 episodes in a row that my appearances on the Silver Linings Handbook podcast were going to be like the 23rd and the 30th. And I want to assure you that that is exactly what Jason Blair told me. And then part 1 of the interview he did with me came out like last week. So I have to take for granted that part 2 is coming out tomorrow or Wednesday or something. And it continues our discussion regarding Native American disappearances. And it's so weird. I sound so weird. I'm used to, as you would probably guess, when you do a podcast this long, you get used to the sound of your voice. And a lot of people don't like the sounds of, the sound of their voices. They're like, "Ooh, I didn't know I sound like that." Because when we're hearing our voices, what we're doing is we're not actually hearing it through the air. It's not like the voice is coming out here and then our ears are picking it up. We hear our voices through our mouth. It's the vibrations inside our mouth. That's how we hear our voice. And that's why sometimes the way we think we sound is different than when we hear a recording of ourselves. And you really get used to this, have to get used to this when you sing. And so I thought, I get used to the sound of my voice doing all the recording. And then I hear myself interviewed by Jason. It's like, it sounds like the recording is just sped up just a little bit. And I was like, I know I can talk fast sometimes, but wow, I sound like I'm on something. It's like at 1.1 speed or something. It's like 10% like faster than normal or something. And I even, I know I have a little bit of a nasally voice anyway. It even sounds more nasally than that. It must be the compression, because Jason sounds like himself. So it must be something having to do with recording, the compression, the way the program that he uses to record processes voices or something. Because if you hear it, maybe some of you have already listened to it. Maybe some of you thought, is that really Ed? It sounds like it's sped up. What is this? I don't know what to tell you. I think part one was fantastic. I told Jason so. I thought I made some really good points in part number one regarding, why is it that Native American disappearances, seem to not get as much attention as other minorities. And I think I made some valid points there. I also made the point, they talk about how there aren't enough police officers on Indian reservations. And I think I made a pretty good point about that. But in part number two, whenever it comes out, it'll be soon, will be us discussing some specific actual Native American disappearances. And I'll give some insights, opinions on those. And like I said, I thought it went really well. It was a recording we did way back in August. And it was actually 2 hours, right in a row. And then he split it up into 2 1-hour segments. So be looking for part number two. And I can only take for granted that I'll sound in part number two like it did in part number one. If Jason's out there, I'm not necessarily complaining. It's just that I know it's me and it sounds like me kind of, but it doesn't 100% sound like me. One more thing before I get to this Friday's disappearance is that, first of all, you should be checking out the new Unfound website. It is now up and running. It's still the unfoundpodcast.com, but it's a lot easier to use. It looks a lot better. I think it's quite an improvement over the previous one, and getting the website fixed was one of those things on my bucket list or my to-do list for 2025. And I need to thank a guy actually that I've known for a long time. He was my brother Brian and his wife's neighbor. His name is Sheldon, who came forward. And, when I was looking for somebody, it's like, put it out there. Hey, I need a website built. He contacted me. He goes, well, Ed, it's kind of one of the things that I do. I was like, no, Sheldon, I didn't know that. Even though I've known this guy, I don't know, since I moved to Florida. And he also runs the football pick'em that I'm in, and I'm not doing very well there so far. So I want to thank him for, he actually works with another guy doing this stuff. I want to thank them for putting together the new Unfound website, theunfoundpodcast.com. I can actually talk about it now. I have to admit, for all that time, I was very embarrassed by how the website looked. So I'm glad that I got that fixed. But you should also know there will be another website coming. And it will have to do with some new work that I hope to start doing some missing persons consulting, where I will, people will reach out to me. They'll send me all their information. And then instead of it becoming a podcast, I will be putting together, an analysis of the disappearance, and I will be giving a family a report in which what I think happened, the things that they should do, what should be done now. I don't care if the disappearance is a month old or 25 years old. And I'm going to put a money back guarantee on it. I'm going, I know that I'm going to put my actions where my mouth is. So I will be charging for this. However, if I end up I will make a prediction. I'll tell them, here's the things that you need to do. Here are the things that I see here, the problems I see here. Here's what you can do. Here's the information you should try to get. Because as you know, I'm a big believer in these families trying to do the work themselves, because private investigators suck. They charge way too much money. They're not going to solve any disappearances. The police aren't going to do it. They don't know what they're doing. They're only interested in what's happening today, not what happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Families are going to have to do it. So I'm going to try to put as much information and my knowledge in the hands in an actual report, a step-by-step directions that they can follow to move their particular investigation, the disappearance investigation, forward. Now, I will be charging for this. However, if I will make a prediction during my assessment, I will make a prediction as to what happened to their missing person. If I am proven wrong, I will give them 100% of their money back. However, if I am proven correct, then they have to pay me double. And if it just turns out that nothing happens, as long as nothing happens, it'll just be the fee that I charged up front. I am going to put my, like I said, my experience and everything where my mouth is. I keep saying I think I'm pretty good at predicting what happened to people. And I think that this prediction rate is getting better and better and better. We're going to put it to the ultimate test, where if I'm not right, I will lose the money that I earned. So that website's not quite done yet. I gave what is close to being final approval on it today. It should be up shortly, and we shall see. I'm not going to be charging a lot, but certainly a lot less than what I hear private investigators are going for these days. And of course, we know they do crap work. So I'll let you know when that's up, and you can all go to that website as well. So this Friday, what are we doing this Friday? Well, I am actually, I interviewed two hosts of another podcast that I would say is relatively new. The name of this podcast is Tragedy, and it is hosted by a married couple, Alyssa and Michael. And over the course of about 7, 8 episodes, they covered the still unsolved disappearance of Ian Rogers. This is up in Crawfordville, Florida, up in the Panhandle near Tallahassee. He went missing on August 26th of 2024. He and his vehicle, it actually wasn't his vehicle, it was actually a work vehicle. He actually went missing while he was on the job in this work vehicle. And Alyssa and Michael reached out to me and said they would like to come on to Unfound to talk about Ian. And Alyssa and Michael have talked to people in Ian's family. They've spoken to divers who've gone into lakes up there looking for, of course, the truck and Ian, of course, unsuccessful so far. They've talked to a lot of different people. And then they reached out to me. They said they'd like to come on to talk about Ian and the disappearance. I think also, of course, to get some attention for their new podcast that has been out for about 5 months. So that's what we're going to do. Once again, Ian Rogers, Crawfordville, Florida, August 26th, 2024. The guest will be the host of Tragedy, a true crime podcast. You can, of course, find it on iTunes and Spotify. They got started. They actually started with the murder of an unsolved murder of someone actually in Michael's family. Very interesting. And this is a vehicle missing disappearance as well. You know how rare those are. It gets us an opportunity to take a look at another one. That's all I got for tonight. Robin Graham, Charlie Kirk, 50 Cent covered all the stuff in the title, so I feel satisfied. Hopefully all of you do. Once more, give this video and show a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel. Support Unfound if you can. Keep your heads on swivels out there. Do not allow, what did I talk about? The acceptance of deviance. Remember that? Don't allow that to creep into your life. Charlie, say hi to the kids for me. And what do you say we do this all again next Monday? Good night.